F1.
Red flag. Red flag's to slow down. What?
The checkered flag is waiting.
I can see our Chequered Flag podcast being quite spicy.
5 Live's Chequered Flag podcast.
Welcome to the Lusail International Circuit, where as you can hear, the fireworks are going off around the podium celebrations, illuminating the night sky here in Lusail, just 30 kilometres outside the capital city of Qatar, Doha. And wowee, the fireworks really setting the weekend off with a bang, and it has been an eventful one from start to finish. So much to unpick after both a sprint race and a Grand Prix here in Qatar. And to talk through it all with me is our lead commentator Harry Benjamin and racing driver Alex Brundle. Guys, it's pretty loud and noisy down here in the F1 paddock. I imagine a little quieter in the commentary box. But what a weekend. We have to just applaud Max Verstappen once again. A 3-time world champion now, started on pole position this evening for the Grand Prix, and he came home to take the win, the 14th win of the season for him. Just the perfect way to end this weekend here in Qatar and head off home.
Yeah, he can get his proper celebrations in now as it takes to the top step on Sunday. Didn't win it, obviously, won the title on the Saturday, but coming into this weekend we knew it would be fabulous and flawless, and once again the Dutchman does just that.
Exactly, so impressive, isn't he, Alex Brundle? And already thinking about the next races to come and already analysing the race that's just gone. You know, the first stint was the best bit for him, and then he was able to manage the pace. Still so analytical and self-critical, and yet a 3-time world champion, of course.
What's impressive is he prepared himself for all eventualities. So even when he was dealt the curveball of the late tyre strategy change, they still somehow find a set of medium tyres, then somehow find a gap, and then deliver the laps he needs to, so he's never under pressure. And all of those things just are the way that we've seen Verstappen build the race in any circumstances throughout this year. And that's why he just keeps on finding himself on the top step, because they're so adaptable and successful in those changing circumstances.
Can I just say, these fireworks are insane. Rosanna, can you find the person who set them off and tell them we're recording a podcast?
I don't know, I think that's absolutely brilliant. That might have been the last one, actually. Oh, wow, how amazing. I love fire. Oh, no, sorry. Preemptive. A bit premature there. And actually, Max Verstappen's race engineer, Jean-Pierre Lambiese, has just walked past me holding a trophy. I love the radio comms between them this evening as well. Alex, you picked up on that, didn't you? The way that Jean-Pierre was sort of like, yeah, if you could just, manage the pace a bit faster and stuff. He didn't just say, like, we need you to go a bit faster, Max. It's funny, that engineering speak.
It's consequential on the lap distance remaining. If we could achieve a managed increase in the lap speed using the resources available within the vehicle, that would be fantastic. It was all a bit yes minister, wasn't it? Down the line.
I needed a translation.
Down the line at Max Verstappen. It was nice to hear.
Oh, I love it. Why use 2 words when you could use 42?
Well, they had lots of time, didn't they, at the front? So why not, I suppose?
Absolutely. Well, Max Verstappen will finally be able to celebrate properly this evening, or perhaps this week. Of course, we pause a little now before the US Grand Prix. And an interesting weekend for his teammate Sergio Perez. Did manage to scrape into the top 10 this evening, but with some time penalties as well. So mixed fortunes for Red Bull Racing on such a special weekend.
Unfortunately, though, it's not good enough from Sergio Perez. I know he's under pressure, and we're batting that same drum left, right, and centre, and he can't achieve the same things as his teammate. But getting several 5-second time penalties unnecessarily for a driver of his level in a car of that level, I'm sorry, I don't think that's acceptable.
Yeah, well, if you're listening to the Chequered Flag podcast with dogs nearby, I do apologise if these fireworks are scaring them off. Let's have a listen to what Max Verstappen had to say after his incredible weekend here in Qatar.
Hey, Max, congratulations. Another win on the board. I think that's 14 and 17 this year. Just talk me through how tough it was, though, out there to get that done.
Yeah, it was quite warm out there. So that was probably the hardest bit. I think we made our race, I think, in the first stint where I could really pull a gap. But yeah, from there onwards, I think they were quite competitive behind us, even though I was just managing a bit my pace. The gap at the end of the race was still not that big. So yeah, it was close. But I think it was also a bit helped for most because of the forced restop. So you couldn't really go into the full tire deck of a tire.
Does it feel like McLaren are coming, even with those reasons in behind why it maybe wasn't a true picture?
They're getting closer, for sure. I mean, they're improving a lot, so we have to keep working hard. Yeah.
Well, Max Verstappen, a 3-time world champion and another race victory under his belt. He sure knows how to sign off in style. But coming home ahead of the two McLarens, we knew they had pace, didn't we, guys, on Friday in that qualifying session. Of course, track limits already playing into the narrative of the weekend at that point, with both drivers losing their times on Friday evening and, of course, being told bizarrely in that Parc Fermé interview session. So it was nice to see them kind of get the result that actually that speed deserved with a 2-3 with Oscar Piastri coming home ahead of Lando Norris.
It sure was, and it's definitely the result that their pace deserved. There was a period in the middle of the race where Verstappen was on the hard tyre that the McLarens appeared to be able to stay with him for pace, and I got quite excited, and then of course the managed increase in pace occurred, and Verstappen drove away. But they're definitely demonstrating ability across a wide range of circuits down at McLaren, and they're getting used to running at the front strategically. Critically as well, Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris might be delivering them a little bit of an issue by being so close together on track, but it opens up some strategic windows for them into the future. If Sergio Perez cannot find form in that Red Bull, it's going to be 2-on-1 bullying, isn't it, if McLaren are in the championship next year?
And talk of championship positioning right now, with the way Piastri and Norris are firing on all cylinders, scoring points left, right and centre, they're only 11 points behind Aston Martin for fourth in the Constructors now. Aston Martin, I know Fernando Alonso sort of dismissed Lando Norris's comment last time around that they could be overtaken by McLaren by the end of the year. I think he'll be looking over his shoulder a bit more now.
Do you know what as well? I mean, this double podium for McLaren, back-to-back ones, of course. Don't forget, in Japan, the last time out, they also had a double podium, but just flip-reverse it with Norris ahead of Piastri. That is the first time they've done that since 2010, consecutive double podiums. That was the Canadian European Grand Prix back in 2010. So we talk about this change of form for McLaren in 2023, but it's also a change of form in sort of over a decade.
It's fantastic to see.
I
just think it's a team everyone loves McLaren, I think, and they came through a really tough decade. You know, when they were with Honda and the new regulations first came in, they really struggled. They had the 1 year with Mercedes, didn't they, in 2014, and then they changed to Honda, and it was just a turmoil that got worse and worse and worse. Then they came out of that slump and they refound their form, and we were seeing them on the move. Sainz and Norris, then Ricciardo and Norris, and then suddenly Norris and Piastri, another regulation change, and at the start of the year McLaren were plumb last and back down to zero, and you could just feel the groans, not just from Woking but from everybody in Formula One, having seen them climb that ladder only to then find a snake and fall all the way down it again. But now they have miraculously, it's some of the best rate of development I think we've seen in Formula One in quite a while. The increase in pace they have managed to find. They are the second fastest team right now.
Harry, I love that analogy, the snakes and ladders.
That was good, wasn't it?
Formula One. That is Formula One all over, isn't it? It is. It's such a tricky game to get right. Well, let's hear from Oscar Piastri, taking his first victory in F1 yesterday in that sprint race, and then his best career result in a Grand Prix this evening. P2 for the Australian rookie.
Hey Oscar, well I was calling you Mr. Sprint earlier, but you're basically Mr. Grand Prix now. What an awesome performance out there today. Just how satisfied are you with that?
Yeah, very, very satisfied. I think that was the most we could have done. Tough race out there, and second and third for the team is an amazing result. You know, it's been an amazing weekend in general. Very happy.
How is it happening? Is it just the car is kind of delivering the results that you need, or is it just you're kind of just finding your way a little bit more, or just a combination of the both?
I think mostly the car. I think, you know, from quite early on in the year we knew Suzuka and here would probably be kind to us. It's been the case. I think Friday, I think both Lando and I were quite frustrated with ourselves in qualifying. I think yesterday, obviously was a very good day for myself, and today I think it's been good, and we were able to show the pace of the car. So encouraging. To finish within 5 seconds of Max is pretty unbelievable from the start of the season. So I'm very happy.
We've spoken about Oscar Piastri's maturity, haven't we? The approach that he has to Formula One. He had a year on the sidelines, didn't graduate from F2 to F1 automatically, had to bide his time. But my goodness me, we spoke about it in the Chequered Flag podcast after the sprint. That patience has paid off. And I feel like that patience and that maturity is going to stand him in good stead if, as you say, Alex, it kind of comes to blows between himself and Lando Norris.
He's very much used to that, and you've got to remember that Oscar Piastri is coming, yes, into his rookie season, but he's also coming from Formula 2, battling for championships, where he's been battling wheel to wheel, year after year after year through the junior formula. Lando Norris has had a period of years where his teammates not necessarily been up with him, but he's been in the midfield of Formula 1. There's been a lot more strategy, and so bizarrely, Oscar Piastri might be a little bit better versed even wheel to wheel than Lando Norris, albeit that this is the world of Formula One.
If you don't watch F2, you should, because some of the action that you get to see across a race weekend, my goodness me, it's elbows out stuff.
Exactly, and especially with the nature of battling we have seen in that forward phase of the mid-pack, it's definitely that kind of thing going on. But it's an interesting interplay between them. They're really going to have to support Lando Norris, and I think it might be actually McLaren's biggest battle moving into next season, to make sure that actually they don't have a collapse of the guard of Lando Norris specifically, with all of the pressure that Oscar Piastri is bringing to the lineup.
Yeah, a bit of work for Andrea Stella to do, and a bit of management, I think, of his drivers. You said, didn't you, Harry, during commentary, that after Monza, that wasn't what Andrea Stella wanted to see. They need those, when we're talking about the Constructors' Championship, they need the drivers to come home. We need the cars in one piece. We can't have teammates running into each other.
Yeah, absolutely right. And on that point, as Alex picked me up for, I said they came close, but they did actually touch in Monza. And it was a light touch, but that clearly is way too much for Andrea Stella. And you can understand why. You know, they're not in the business right now of fighting for titles, so why bother having this issue of a number one, number two, let's fight on track, let's play the team game? And I think Andrea Stella has been a little bit underestimated so far this year, coming into that role, effectively being the team principal for McLaren, Zach Brown sitting above him. I think he outlined that they were already behind in their car development before we even hit the track in round one in Bahrain. He made that clear. Him and Zach Brown making changes to the technical team about 6 months ago, and now we are seeing that pay off massively. It's teamwork. Play the team game for now. We've got a couple of get through to the end of this season, because 2024 is now only around the corner, and McLaren, if they continue this pace, okay, let's see what Red Bull do, but McLaren could well and truly be in the fight for a constructors title for the first time in a long time within the next 5 years.
I love Andrea Stella's approach as team principal, in inverted commas. I love how pragmatic he is, how realistic. He doesn't get overexcited when they're scoring podiums. I really like how he is managing the team at the moment. And of course, they had to manage Lando Norris's request this evening. I did think there was a playful tone to Lando on the radio. Did you not think? It wasn't kind of, guys, let me through, I need to get the position on Oscar. It was quite like, but I'm a bit quicker. A bit like that, wasn't it? Kind of questioning.
It was very Gen Z, wasn't it? The request from Lando Norris.
Is that what they call it? Sorry.
He was. I felt like it was the softer touch from him, but he meant what he said. He actually came with another radio message later on that the dirty air was too much for him to actually catch Oscar Piastri. So it became an issue that kind of resolved itself, because Lando Norris couldn't actually catch Piastri within the time frame. If he had managed to, it would have been very interesting to see what decision Lando Norris actually took there, because although Lando asked, the team said we're going to run line astern to the flag, I never actually heard Lando agree.
I don't think he probably did, Alex. But it was interesting because Oscar Piastri slightly backed off, didn't he, in the last little part of the race. And as you say, it would have been interesting if we'd had another couple of laps. If Oscar was struggling with tyres, perhaps Lando would have got him and gone against those sort of, are we calling them team orders? Yes, I probably am, I think. Yeah. Let's hear from Lando Norris then. P3 for the British driver in the McLaren car.
Hey Orlando, a heck of a comeback drive out there today to get back onto the podium. I know it wasn't the final result you wanted at the start of the weekend, but still phenomenal, right, for you and for the team.
Yes, no, you're right. Just a great race, good start, made up for yesterday I went wide in turn 1. Turned out to be the incorrect thing to do. So today I went tight and it worked out perfectly. So great start, led to a good race, the pace was excellent. Probably pace good enough to keep up with Max. Just lost a lot in traffic. As soon as you get within a couple of seconds, your life gets a lot more difficult. So the pace was great. I was behind Oscar. Just, obviously couldn't get close enough in the dirty air. But good fun, tough. Probably one of the toughest, actually I would definitely say the toughest race I've done, just physically. But good fun, always is when you're fighting for these positions. And I kept pushing to the end. So it was a rewarding race.
Heard you wanted to fight, obviously, with Oscar and see what you could do because you had such strong pace out there. And I know you weren't able to do that, but you must take a lot of positives in the fact you've been on the podium now a lot recently, and you've still got 5 races to go, and that bodes well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, starting from P10 to get to P3 is probably a bit better than I was expecting today with how things were with the tyres and the limited things you could do. But yeah, the pace was good enough to win today, so bit more of a knife further in after the last few days, just showing that we had the pace probably to be on top if I didn't do the mistakes I made earlier on the weekend. And I guess that's why I was just disappointed with myself, because I knew what we were capable of maybe coming into today, and if I didn't start 10th I definitely would have finished higher than 3rd. So yeah, it's a tough one to swallow, but it's the way it is. I have to keep my chin up, keep moving on, and definitely a day like today helps me do that.
We've spoken about our top 3 finishers. Max Verstappen, the 3-time world champion, winning the Qatar Grand Prix ahead of the 2 McLarens, Oscar Piastri ahead of Lando Norris. But just off the podium was George Russell in the Mercedes. And guys, that was a recovery drive. And if you didn't watch the whole race or haven't watched it yet, hope we've not spoiled it too much for you. But of course, it was a comeback drive because he clashed with his teammate at the first corner. What a moment for Mercedes.
What a moment. As soon as I saw that Turn 1 incident, I immediately had flashbacks to 2016 Barcelona. Championship not quite on the line this time around for the 2 Mercedes drivers. At that stage, it was Rosberg and Hamilton. This time, Hamilton and Russell. Hamilton trying round the outside of Russell, who was in the middle of the road, chasing Verstappen, who cut across him and was hiding that inside line coming into Turn 1. And to us at the time, it looked like a racing incident, and I think over the team radio, both drivers were quite upset at each other. Russell seemed more remorseful than Hamilton. Hamilton since tweeted saying, "I've watched the replay and it was 100% my fault and I take full responsibility. Apologies to my team and to George." So there you have it. Fair play. I think it was a bit... maybe not 50-50.
He started on the soft tyre, so the faster starting tyre. Surely George and Mercedes, in their engineering sort of briefing session before the race, would have known that Lewis would be a little racier off the line. And so should people really have kind of known the choreography was going to play out in a certain way at that point of the race, Alex?
I think that between the drivers, they know the level of grip that they are on. I think Lewis is being potentially slightly hard on himself there, actually. Had slightly better grip from that soft tyre. I do see it as a racing incident. I don't think there's anywhere that George could have gone. He had Max Verstappen to the inside of him. And I think it's very sporting of Lewis to send that tweet out, as I saw earlier on. And it was by mid-race. He said he'd seen the replay and saw it as his fault. So trying to keep, I think, a positive environment within the team, but definitely very unfortunate for Mercedes on a day where George Russell looked to have almost the pace of the McLarens, and they would definitely have both been up there. It was going to be a points finish, I believe, for both Mercedes today without that issue. When you look at the way George Russell, even with a tiny bit of floor damage, drove back through the field.
Yeah, and it could have been a chunky points haul for Lewis Hamilton as well, because he's thinking he's going to try and get that P2 in the driver's standings, of course, try and nab that off Sergio Perez, who was much further down the order at that point. So I'm sure Lewis says he's not actually that worried about P2 in the standings, but of course he'd have been hoping that was something he might have been able to sort of eat into, that gap between himself and Checo. Let's hear from Lewis Hamilton then. He had a very dejected a little bit of body language when he came into the media pen, very, very disappointed with how it all panned out. Here he is.
Lewis, obviously sorry to see you out of the Grand Prix on the first lap. Just give us your read of how that first corner went when you went side by side with George and Max.
Yeah, obviously gutting, and massive apology to everyone back at the factory. Yeah, it was I think just probably a racing incident, but I'll take full responsibility for it. I don't think George really had anywhere to go, so.
You had such a good getaway, and there was a lot of potential, I guess, in the race today. When you look back on it, would there anything you'd have done differently, do you think?
It's always in hindsight you do things differently.
Right, thank you.
It was a disappointing weekend, or a disappointing end to the weekend for Lewis Hamilton, then out of the race by turn 1, beached in the gravel. And Alex, you think it was good sort of sportsmanship that he's come out and owned that mistake? Do you think when he and George have a little chat, there'll be any sort of afterburners on that one?
I suspect they'll run through it to just understand, as you put it, Rosanna, the choreography of what occurred and what they've misunderstood about each other's trajectory more than anything down towards turn 1 there, to make sure it doesn't happen again. I mean, there's always a sort of general meeting whenever you have contact between two cars in the same garage, and I would expect no difference from Mercedes, who knowingly to all in the paddock are extremely meticulous about how they analyse these things. So I would thoroughly expect a bit of a round table on how that one is to be avoided next time.
In Japan, it was sort of the argy-bargy between Lewis Hamilton and George Russell was kind of once the race had settled down, and then it's easier for the team to intervene. But at a first turn on the first lap, you can't really do much about it from the team's point of view. And that was what I kind of was a bit mystified by with George Russell's radio. It was, come on, guys. It was really quite bemoaning of the team, but they couldn't really have done anything at that point.
We're in the heat at the moment, aren't you, for Russell? And then he was sort of quite apologetic at times. And what I found really interesting about the team radio scenario, Toto Wolff came on to the radio to chat to Russell. Toto is not in Qatar. He's at home recovering from a knee operation. Jerome D'Ambrosio is stepping up in his place this weekend and has done in Japan as well. But that highlights just how dialed in Toto Wolff still is, even to have direct communication with Russell in the car. I think that was really fascinating and shows just how and to what length Mercedes will go after this race to analyse that and to make sure nothing like that ever happens again.
Brilliant, these radios, aren't they? You can talk to anyone from anywhere.
Oh, that is true, yeah. But even in the car, I think that's kind of cool.
It's impressive stuff, isn't it?
That's when I used to do the driver of the day interviews. I'd be back at F1's base in Biggin Hill talking to a driver out on track in another country. Blew my mind, I tell you.
This
so
technology.
George Russell, I know, Gen Z was it? So George Russell finishing P4, and on a day where actually it looked like the Mercedes had some pace. It was so disappointing for them that they weren't able to get two cars to the checkered flag. But what do we read into that pace? Does that mean we're going to see more of it come the US Grand Prix in just a couple of weeks' time, guys?
I think there's every likelihood of it, especially in race conditions where they have seemed to be stronger throughout the year. But the impressive part here was when they were put up, when George Russell was put up in that qualifying position, I thought, wow, okay, finally a Mercedes that's going to have a chance to race from the front. They had the contact down in turn 1, and it seemed so raceable, the car, and that's the problem that they've had throughout the season. They've had the pace, but they've not been able to make those moves because there's been too much drag in that Mercedes. The moves, though, were being made by George Russell, especially down the inside of turn 6, and it was good to see him have so much confidence in the front end of that car and be able to put that recovery drive in.
Definitely fired up, I think, from that first turn on lap 1 altercation. So he finished ahead of Charles Leclerc in P5, and that was the only Ferrari on the grid this evening. Carlos Sainz unable to even take the start due to a fuel system issue, so they pulled him out before we even went to the grid. Ahead of Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, and then Esteban Ocon P7, ahead of Valtteri Bottas picking up some points in P8. Sergio Perez managing to get into the points, P9 for him. He started from the pit lane, so another recovery drive for him there, but clumsy with track limits, and that was a real topic in this evening's Grand Prix. Several drivers picking up penalties. Is that, I'm going to say, acceptable? I mean, I could barely drive a car out of the pit lane, my own road car. But, you know, these drivers know the limits now. They have had a bit of a chance to see this track. I know we've had shorter running sessions because of the sprint format, but should we see that many penalties? And it was the same drivers, wasn't it?
Well, it harks back to Austria, doesn't it? I think Perez actually ended up 10th in the end, behind Zhou Guanyu. So Zhou got 9th because of some 5-second time penalties for Perez being, doing it multiple times. And we heard the frustration from his engineer, Hugh Bird, on the radio. This is costing us. Unnecessarily costing us. And that, I mean, I said it earlier, that when there's one thing struggling for pace and you know, Perez can say, oh, you know, I just struggle with this car, lack of confidence gets into your head. And yes, track limits clearly are an issue here, but not everybody got penalties. Perez getting all of the penalties. It's not on.
It's connected though, isn't it? Because when you are struggling for pace and when you are trying to make progress, you start to use every single centimetre you possibly can of track in every single corner. Then you're only one tiny mistake away from an offence on track limits. Whereas when you've got the car underneath you, when you really believe in it and when it's rotating nicely for you, somehow that little bit of pressure is taken off your shoulders, the fluidity comes back into your driving, and you're not wringing the car out, and it's easier to control it within the track limits. So I think just that pressure of trying to keep with the theoretical pace of that Red Bull, as demonstrated by Max Verstappen, is causing these issues for Perez, whether it's in traffic, as we saw in Suzuka, or here with the track limits.
You're absolutely right. Perez coming home P10 then to take that solitary point, and it meant it was a double points finish for Alfa Romeo, scoring in the same race for the first time in 2023. So a good result for them. Further down the field, we've got Lance Stroll, P11, Pierre Gasly. He picked up a time penalty or two. Alex Albon as well. Kevin Magnussen, Yuki Tsunoda, Nico Hülkenberg and Liam Lawson. And then we had this bizarre scenario where Logan Sargent pulled out of the race because he didn't feel well. And Alex, you know what it's like to race. You know what it feels like, I'm sure, to not feel 100% in the cockpit. How impressed were you that he finally made what I'm going to say the right decision to get out of that car?
Yeah, it's a mature call. And actually, to be honest, when the rest of the field got out of their cars and we saw them in the cool-down room lying on the floor, even drivers who were feeling well throughout the race distance, it made a bit more sense that Liam Lawson, if he wasn't feeling... Logan Sargent, I should say, if he wasn't feeling 100%, jumped out of the car. I have been that hot in a closed cockpit sports car over 50 degrees. And there is no amount of training, there is no amount of cardiovascular work, muscular work, which will prepare you for the panic your body feels when you plane are overheating like that. We saw loads of drivers opening the visor up to try to just get some kind of air to the face and into the helmet. And the correct decision, because you start to lose control of the car, essentially, especially in the really fast corners. And when you get to that point, as James Vowles says over the radio to Logan Sargent through the race, you must stop because you're only ever a few laps away from a big accident.
And I fear we may have that little clip from James Vowles, the team principal at Williams, that will look after you. I think it was something like that, wasn't it? I feel like that might be clipped up and used in a documentary, probably not in the right way. But anyway, that was what happened to Logan Sargent. The team telling me that he only fell ill this evening, so it's not something he's been dealing with over the course of the weekend. Hopefully he can rest and recover, get plenty of electrolytes on board, I'm sure, to make himself 100% again. Then, of course, we've already spoken about Lewis Hamilton out on the first lap and Carlos Sainz not taking the start. So driver of the day, guys.
Ooh.
Who'd like to go first?
Well, Alex, this is your first BBC 5 Live F1 commentary, so I think it would only be polite to let Brundle go first.
I'm staring intently into the universe of my tyre screen here to see who really made progress throughout this weekend. I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna take the low-hanging fruit on my first attempt and go for Oscar Piastri, who I thought drove a brilliant race. The start opened up for him, but he didn't get sucked into the accident, which is very easy for a rookie to do on the outside of turn 1. Actually has thanked whoever caused the issue over social media for gifting him 4 places off the line. So I think he drove a brilliant race.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, obviously Verstappen has to have, the glories, but I want to be a little bit difficult. I'm going to go, actually... That
sounds like you.
Yeah, careful. I'm going to go for Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. I know it was only 8th, but it was a cracking weekend for Bottas. He's had the pace in that Alfa all weekend long, both in the sprint and in the Grand Prix matches. Here's an Alfa Romeo's best result of the season, and Joe Guan Yu gets an admirable mention as well. So that's my pick. Rosanna, what about you?
Yeah, got to mention Max Verstappen, of course, 3-time world champion. What he's been doing is incredible.
I was teeing that up for you to take Verstappen, Rosanna.
Thank you very much. And I've taken it. I've had a little nibble on it. But I'm also going to give a shout out to George Russell, because I think from plummeting down the order after that contact with his teammate, he drove a great recovery race and showed that car's got a bit of pace in it. So thought that was great. And obviously got to mention the McLarens. I just think what they've done this year is fabulous. So that's a few drivers. Sorry about that. Sorry. Yeah. Must do better next time. And talking of next time, we will be in the US for the US Grand Prix in a couple of weeks' time. Circuit of the Americas will host us for what's sure to be another exciting weekend, another sprint, guys.
Oh, another one, I know. They're coming thick and fast, aren't they? Only a couple are left. It's US and then Sao Paulo in Brazil will be the final sprint of the year. So I think it's going to be a pretty full-on home stretch towards the end of the season. 22 Grand Prix by the end of it.
Yeah, no, they do come thick and fast. Well, bit of pleasure chatting through the Qatar Grand Prix with you both, Alex Brundle and Harry Benjamin, and me, Rosanna Tennant, here in the F1 paddock. It has been incredibly hot and sweaty here in Qatar. I'm about to go and jump on a plane back to the UK. Thanks for listening along. We will talk to you next time from Austin, Texas. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.